Good morning. So, I just want to get on here and continue with the series of the steps because it's been working for me. I am unfortunately quarantined for probably, who knows, maybe a couple of days. I have to be quarantined. So everybody be safe out there, but make sure that you're wearing your mask and hand sanitizing. That's why you've seen me on here for a while because I'm quarantined. Keisha Payne, KP, is in the quarantine. Unfortunately, I work in the medical field, and we're the front liners. And unfortunately, sometimes we're the ones who incidentally will get this. And I've gotten it before, even though I've been vaccinated. And so I got some time on my hands. I'm quarantined in my room. So I'm going to continue with this. Please pray for me and I will pray for you. Thank you. So I wanted to share step 7. It's to ask God to remove your shortcomings. And this is the 7th step prayer. And so I'm going to go ahead and read it. If you can't see it, just go ahead and put your screen on, enlarge your screen. Step 7 reads such as follows: humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. And this is the 7th step prayer. My Creator, I am now willing that you should take all of me, good and bad. I pray I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. So, if you've read that, you've completed step 7. um, one day at a time. If you're not able to get out and go to meetings, go on online meetings. It will bless you, will help you. I will be playing some AA stories here and there if people want to click on and just listen to, some AA stories. I feel like if you feel like you're a little squirrely in your head or you feel the urge to use or to drink, the best thing for you to do is talk about it and go to a meeting. That's the best thing to do. So the step 7th prayer is great. It keeps you humble, and it reminds you that God can remove these shortcomings. And I'll read it again. My Creator, I am now willing that you should take all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here and do your bidding. You have completed the 7th step prayer and the 7th step. Yes, amen. Hold on, I can't see the. Hey, pineapples, good morning. There's a lot going on in everywhere. There's so much going on. And I'm not going to put it in the title, but I'm just going to speak off of what I've noticed, what's going on with somebody that's in the sobriety slash not, it's not the mommy sector. She's in the sobriety slash, I guess, beef sector. And her name is Misunderstood, and everybody's talking about her. Everybody's talking about what's going on. And my advice to you, misunderstood, and I know you probably don't watch my channel, but maybe somebody will tell you, is to stay offline. My advice to you is to go to some meetings, journal, and disconnect from this app because it's not serving you well. They say in early recovery to not go on social media because it might, even if you haven't picked up physically, mentally, it's going to it can be your downfall. So yeah, I hope and pray that you don't have a relapse. I know that people say relapse is a part of recovery, but it doesn't have to be a continuous part of recovery. I know that many people suffer from being they continuously relapse. But if this app is triggering you, I say take a break, get away from it, and go to meetings and listen to people. Listen to people that have gone through what you're going through, and stop listening to what other people are saying and just go help yourself, take care of yourself, go to meetings, journal about what's happening. Don't look at what other people are saying about you. And yeah, just listen to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a meeting to play, and I hope that it blesses you. This is the seventh step prayer, but I'm going to go find something to play to share some experience, strength, and hope for recovery. Hold on hallelujah. Um, Hold on one second. This is not what I'm gonna find an AA meeting here. Maybe I'll talk about this one is fear. This is a long one. But they're usually about an hour long. I don't know if I'll play the whole thing, but I'll find some. I'm gonna find a woman AA speaker. Maybe that will help. Julie, I think I did Julie, Adele, June. Um, I'm just gonna pick this one. Good morning. Hope that you're having a good day. I'm just on doing my service work today. Hold on, let me pause this really quick. Unfortunately, Ruby, I got COVID, and I am quarantined in my room. I work in the medical field, and I got this, and it's my kids, they're blessed, they don't have it. I tested, I believe 3, 4 days ago. No, I'm on day 3, and so I got a lot of time on my hands, and I'm healing. It's not as bad as it was when I've gotten it before, like, my breathing's not as compromised as it used to be when I got it before and I've gotten the vaccine, but I do feel like I have a really bad flu and, I feel weak, but I'm getting better. So please pray for me. Pray that I get through this. I appreciate it. Oh,
For as long as I can remember, I was filled with fear fear of not being good enough,
thank you.
fear that I would never measure up to the sister that wasn't, fear that the brother, the boy, would be loved more than I was, fear of never fitting in, and
So I just wanna say before I continue to get this started, what you know what? I'm not gonna say what I do in the medical field, and I'll tell you why. Because unfortunately, there's people on this app that want to see you fall. There's people on this app that will do anything to find out where you work, contact your job. And I'm going to give a little experience, strength, and hope before I play this woman speaker from AA. First of all, I want to say I give an honor to God, my higher power, my understanding, Jesus Christ. And I pray that my message, my experience, strength, and hope of what I'm about to share resonates and help somebody that's maybe a content creator that may have slipped up and just like the way I did. I think that was back in 2000. It was actually in 2022. You know, so in 2022, I worked I worked for mental health, and I also was actively content creating for in the mommy sector. Well, I don't know if you guys recall, but there was a time in the mommy sector where reactors were actually doing content on each other. The reactors were fighting, and I'm sure the mommies were really happy that we weren't talking about them. So what I got an email or a message. I remember, I think it was a message somebody commented on one of my videos that said that Storm was going to come after me. Somebody was going to find out where I worked and got me fired. I don't know if they were upset because I was making parodies or whatever, but I can tell you this. I did go live a couple of times when I was at my desk. That was stupid. I wasn't careful about when I was driving. You could see my background. And ultimately, someone contacted my job and compromised my job. Only thing you guys will know is that I went to school in the medical field and I graduated, but I will not ever share anymore the details of what I do for a living, because there's people on this app that want to see you lose your job, possibly your home, everything. And so I'm blessed that I was able to get through it, but it did this app definitely caused me it compromised my job, and I had a position taken away, and I went to court and it worked itself out, and through that closed door I was blessed with other opportunities, and I'm grateful. But this app, I will never allow anything or anyone on this app to know enough about me anymore, besides that I'm a recovering alcoholic and that I'm a mother of three beautiful young men, and I'm thriving and that I work out. Because this is the thing, people want to see you harm people. Yeah, I will never do it again. And so I advise you guys all, if you have something you care about that you're working for, yeah, you guys will see me in scrubs here and there, and I don't even want to do that anymore. I don't hey, Bless Highly, I have to protect myself, as just like, speaking of, I see you, Bless Highly, just like we know that there's people that are calling, they call CPS. And I thank God, like, I mean, even if somebody were to call CPS on me, they ain't gonna find nothing wrong. But people call CPS on people, they call their jobs, they find out where you work. We know that, they've Mink Mob D, they got her arrested. And that's crazy. So there's a lot going on. And so I've learned to protect myself. And so and also I wanted to talk about numbers. When I first started this, I had 15 subscribers. And I think, yeah, thank you, the mommy sector. I had a lot of subscribers after I was doing parodies and things like that. But my main purpose is to share my stories about, how I'm overcoming alcoholism, to encourage others that are struggling, even with mental health or drug addiction, to to live well. So that's what my main focus is. And if you don't, and that, if you don't have a higher power of your understanding, maybe you can borrow mine. If not, I just hope that and pray that you find one. And I pray that everybody lives well. But yeah, bless highly. I am quarantined. Unfortunately, KP had, working in the medical field. I got the C. I don't know if it's the new variant, but I'm able to breathe better than I did when I had the other one. I think it was earlier last year. Since 2020, I remember when I got on this app and I was worried about getting the vaccine, and I was one of the 3,000 people in the county that got the first round of the Moderna vaccinations. And because I was an essential worker at the time, I felt like I needed to get it. And so I got it. And I just want to let you guys know that one of the symptoms, and I pray that YouTube doesn't, because I know when you start talking about the C, and I already said the name, that they put some type of like disclaimer on your video. But I just want to let you guys know that a lot of these symptoms are hiding through, like, it may seem like you have allergies. It might seem like you have I don't know, like you might start sneezing and all that. But I stress that please get tested. You guys, don't go out there and continue to spread it if you have it. I've been quarantined now for about 3 days, and I'm sure that people are walking around and spreading it. And just please stay home. If you feel like you have symptoms, if you have a fever, if you're sneezing, go out and get a test. I don't know if you can find out in your area if they're giving out free tests. Most of the schools are giving away tests to the students. So they're only about $11.99 or maybe $13. Try to find the tests that have 2 in 1 box. That's good. But yeah, back to recovery. So thank you for joining me. I'm going to play Julie's story. She is an alcoholic that's going to share her story, and I might interact with it and I might not, but this is for the suffering alcoholic or addict that wants to hear a story. Here we go.
Just fear of everything. And I displayed that fear in anger and rage. I was the meanest child ever. And if you didn't believe me, I'd show you. I would do whatever it took in order to push you away before you could walk away from me. I would hurt you intentionally.
So right now, Julie is talking about how it was. She'll go into how it used to be and how it is now. And right now, the beginning of her story is she's talking about fear. And oftentimes, and I agree with her. Oftentimes, when you're when you're an active addict, or you've dealt with things in chemical dependency, you do push people away. You do have a lot of fear, and you want to push people away, and before they hurt you, you don't want them to hurt you, so you push them away. Here she goes.
Before I would give you the opportunity to hurt me, I was hell on my parents. We moved around a lot. My father was in the shoe business, and we moved, I guess, about every 2 years. Born in Indiana, then we came to Georgia. And from Georgia, we moved to Chicago. And from Chicago, we moved to Georgia. And from Georgia, we moved to New Jersey. And from Jersey, we moved back to Georgia. I didn't have a clue how to talk. And I certainly didn't fit in, no matter where I went. And I wasn't the only mean kid out there, but I certainly made an easy target out of myself. As mean as I was especially mean to my little brother. He was 2 years younger than me, and that made him easy to pick on. But I have to tell you this also. As much as we moved around, he was also my best friend because he was the constant friend in my life. When I was 14 years old, I had my very first drink. There was no alcohol in our house growing up. My parents were teetotalers.
And yeah, I'm going to do some, I guess, what we would call in recovery crosstalk with this story. And oftentimes people think that alcoholics come from alcoholic families, and that's not always true. Some people, they just like, I agree with, I share the same similar experience with Julie. No one drank in my home when I was growing up, and I also experienced my first drink when I was a teenager.
My father smoked cigarettes up until I was 2 years old, and I picked one up and put it in my mouth. And he put his cigarettes down and he never picked them up again. And I never saw alcohol in our home. Never. I heard stories that my grandfather was an alcoholic, and I heard stories about him drinking and his escapades, but I never saw that. My memories of my grandfather with this big teddy bear of a man that would pull me up into the chair with him and feed me candy. But my first drink, I was 14 years old. My next door neighbor, her parents drank, and I'm sure it wasn't her idea. It was probably completely mine. But I convinced her that we should go to her house before we got on the school bus that morning and mix some of her parents' vodka with a strawberry knee-high that I had to take to school the next day. Yes, folks, my first drink was probably before 7 a.m. And she didn't like it. I set out with that first drink, not to taste it, but to get drunk. I had seen on TV other people get drunk, and they laughed and they had a good time, and they were the life of the party. And that's what I set out to do. And I was kind of grateful she didn't like it and didn't want any more. And so I took that bottle of strawberry knee-high and vodka on the school bus with me that day, and I drank the entire thing. And I was plastered by the time I got to school. But I tell you what, I couldn't wait to get there. Because for the first time ever, everybody was waiting on me. That day, I was the prettiest girl in the school. I was the most well-spoken girl in the school. I had the best sense of humor. I was more popular than any cheerleader in that school. It didn't go well after that. It didn't take long before I was busted. The police were called. The breathalyzer was failed, and my parents were called to come get me. They were not happy with my popularity that day. I was taken home, and I was immediately suspended from school for 10 days. And when I got home, the groundings were set out, the different punishments. You will not see your boyfriend. You will clean the bathrooms. You will vacuum the house. And for as long as I can remember, I did not react well to anything. And I really wasn't willing to suffer the consequences of any of my actions. And I would do whatever it took to get out of facing the consequences. I would react and I would manipulate you. I would be mean to you. I would boss you around. I would instill fear in you, whatever I had to do to get my way. And so that day I emptied my parents' medicine cabinet into my mouth and I swallowed. And that was my first attempt at suicide. And it landed me in the hospital having my stomach pumped. But I tell you what, the way that I reacted to not being willing to deal with the consequences of my actions got me exactly what I wanted that day. It scared my parents to death. I don't remember cleaning the toilets after that. I don't remember vacuuming the house. And I know for a fact I got to see my boyfriend after that. Because it wasn't but a couple months later, at 14 years old, I was pregnant. Whew. That didn't go over well either. My poor parents, I forgot to tell y'all, my daddy was also very active in the church. It was a very religious family. I grew up watching my father participate in church. He was a deacon. He was an usher. I watched him preach from the podium. I was raised in a good home where they instilled morals and values in me. I chose.
Yeah, I like that she points that out. She was raised in a good home. I can relate to that. With raised with morals and values, and oftentimes people ask me, "Well, KP, Keisha, how did you drink, and how did you get to where you couldn't stop?" And my answer to that is, alcoholism is a progressive disease. If you progressively use it, abuse it, do too much of it, you can develop it. Anybody can. It does not discriminate. Doesn't matter what color you are, doesn't matter how much money you have, doesn't matter how educated you are. There's been doctors, lawyers, black, white, uh, Asian, it doesn't matter. Everyone can suffer from this disease. It's um it's progressive. And some people, they get in denial about it. They think, "Oh, I need to switch up what I drink. Maybe if I didn't drink too much of that wine, or maybe I'll switch from wine to beer." And it's all the same. Even when you switch up, it just takes you longer to get to where you are. So, let's continue to listen to Julie.
Not to live by them. I chose instead to react to everything and everybody in my life. I did run away and get married. Yes, in Paulding County, you can do that as long as you're pregnant. And that lasted for a few months, but it wasn't long before he left. And he was only 15 years old, and he just couldn't handle that. I went back home to live with my parents. And in December, my first son was born, Stephen Thomas, 9 pounds. And, as soon as he was born, that child absolutely stole my heart. But even having stolen my heart, that wasn't enough to fix my twisted thinking. And so as soon as the baby was born, I dove right back into this disease that had begun. And all the feelings that I didn't want to feel, the feelings of abandonment, the feelings of not being good enough, the feelings of being different because I had a baby. I drowned all those feelings the only way that I knew how. And every opportunity I got, I drank them away. I did not take care of my child. I was not a good daughter to my parents, and I was not a sister to my brother. I was so selfish and self-centered. The only thing I was concerned with was what Julie needed and getting it when she needed it. Most of the time, that was right now. And that's what I did. My son ended up living with my parents. And I didn't do real well with that either. Although I couldn't take care of him, by God, I didn't want anybody else telling me what I could not do. My daddy doesn't know this. I used to sneak into their house in the middle of the night, and I would go up to his room and I would crawl up under his crib and hold his hand through the crib rails. Because at that point, I wasn't being invited even to go home. And they certainly didn't want to hear what I had to say. Did that for a while and continued to drink and to be the wild child. And by the time I was 18, I met a man who was funny and who loved me. And we caused a lot of problems. We really did get in a lot of trouble. But I married him. And I quit doing any outside issues. I did the best that I could to be a mother and a wife, but my thinking was still skewed. I still reacted, and I didn't react well to anything and everything. And he had buttons that could definitely be pushed, and I felt a sense of control and a sense of power when I pushed those buttons. And when he became violent, I could play the victim. Poor pitiful me. Poor pitiful me. It was all him. It's all him. It's not me. And so that marriage didn't last long. We divorced, and after that divorce, I continued to feed my disease. And I found that when the alcohol wouldn't work, there were other things that were. You know, as a matter of fact, alcohol wasn't near as bad as my parents had told me it was. It made me pretty and funny and all those things, so maybe these other things would too. And so I began to dabble in some outside issues. I found some things that gave me what I thought was power and control. And there was always alcohol to fall back on. You know, by the time I was finally old enough to drink it, it became a little easier to get a hold of. I think I was 23 years old when I met my youngest son's father, and he was older. He was quite a bit older than I was. He had a job and a car and a place to live, and I found those things very attractive. He was stable, and he was absolutely smitten with me, and that made it easy for me to manipulate him in any way that I wanted to. And he was okay with me drinking. I was old enough to drink, and so I did. And before too long, I was pregnant again. Did not see that coming. But he loved me and he wanted to marry me. And I knew I was not in love with him, but I can make this work, right? I can control and I can manipulate and I can make this work. It did not work, y'all. Try as hard as we might. He definitely was there. He suited up, he showed up, and he was the best father he could be and the best husband he could be. And when that little baby boy was born, that one stole a little piece of my soul. Those boys are the light of my life. Unfortunately, love for those children was not enough to keep me sober or to fix the skewed thinking that I have. And so it got to a point to where my oldest son went back to live with my parents, and I was still drinking, and I had begun relapsing often. And so I decided that being the martyr that I was, I would leave my home, have my son's father come back and stay so he wouldn't have to switch schools, so he wouldn't lose his friends, so that he would be where he was familiar with, and I would leave. This disease is cunning, baffling, and powerful. It convinced me that I was doing what was best for my children. And the truth is, I am selfish. I am selfish. And in leaving those children, I was able to throw myself into the middle of my disease and focus on nothing else. And that's what I did. That's exactly what I did. I went from living in a nice middle-class neighborhood, having 2 vehicles, and having a job as a legal secretary in Buckhead, to roaming the streets of Atlanta, willing to do whatever it took, whenever it was able to be done, in order to feed my disease. My first arrest involved a car going the wrong way down Interstate 575 with all 4 tires blown out. It continued from there to helicopters and dogs chasing after us. I was not willing to face the consequences of that. And with it being my first real charge, I was able to avoid too many consequences with that. My co-conspirator or whatever took most of the charges, and I was out on bail within 3 days. And I went straight back to feeding that disease. I didn't take a minute to go home and check on my kids. I didn't take a minute to call my parents and say, I'm sorry my folks in Montana saw me on the news. But I'm still alive and I'm okay. I didn't. I went straight back to feeding my disease. I was arrested again on another drug charge. And at that time I was fairly lucky too. I only spent 2 months in Fulton County. Before too long, feeding the disease, nothing but the disease. My life, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, revolved on doing whatever it took to change how I felt inside, to try to fill this empty hole in my chest. And that's what I did. And I found myself, before too long, headed to prison. It was an 18-month sentence. And that first time I went to Pulaski Women's Prison, folks, it was pink. We had roses and gardenias on the yard. We had air conditioning and we had carpeting, and there were not bunk beds except in diagnostics. And there were AA meetings once a week, and there were NA meetings once a week. And for every meeting you went to, you got pick points. It's 50 points a meeting towards getting out early. And by gosh, I went to meetings. I went to some meetings. And I was released, and this time I did go home. I went home to my parents, and I stayed for a month. And after a month, the disease was calling to me again. And I told them I was going shopping. I took my little paycheck that my daddy had paid me because I was not employable at a real job. And I never called him to come pick me back up. I went straight back to those streets. And then, in less than a month, there was no money. I was standing back on that corner willing to do whatever it took to feed this disease. And I took a look that night, and I realized where I was headed. I was headed right back to that same place that I was. It was a violent place that I was living. I wasn't living, I was surviving. And something just came over me that night. There was a church nearby, and I went to that church, and the doors were locked. And I got on my knees on the steps. And I said, if there is a God out there, that God that my parents believed in, please help me. I can't do this. And within about 2 hours, he sent to Cobb County's finest, and they picked me up. It wasn't exactly what I had in mind. And at first I argued with them, you've got the wrong person. It's not mine. It wasn't me. I didn't do it. And that police officer looked at me and he said, take a look at those people you are with. He said, every one of them has their back turned right now. They're not even looking at you as you are being put into the back seat of this police car. They don't care about you, and you don't care about yourself. But tonight I'm going to do you a favor, and I'm going to save your life. I didn't look at it that way. But I had been given the gift of desperation that night. And as soon as he put me in the back of that police car, a sense of peace came over me. I knew where I was going to get my next meal. I knew that there was going to be a roof over my head. And I'd been to jail many times before. I knew what to expect when I got there. And I knew how to keep my head down and be okay. And so I went to jail. And I don't remember how many months I was there. I don't think it was long before I was called into court. So I already, with probation and parole and all that stuff had been waiting on me anyway. So I went to court, and they put us in this little bitty room. That's about 2 foot by 2 foot. And they put 2 of us in there, And the girl in there with me was in a sheer panic over what was going to happen to her. But I still had peace. And I said, honey, I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know this. I know that if God wants your charges to be dropped, your charges will be dropped. And there's nothing you can do about it. And if God wants you to go away, you're going to go away. It's the same for me as it is for you. We have no control here today. And no sooner had I finished speaking to her than the door opened, and my public defender, the free attorney, stuck his head in and said, ma'am, your officer did not show up and your charges have been dismissed. Now, I still had holds on me for probation violation and for violation of parole. And so I was taken to Cherokee County, and in Cherokee County, I was sentenced to another 18-month term. But I was okay with that. I'd been to prison before. Remember, they have air conditioning and carpets. Oh, not when you're a repeat offender, they don't. They sent me to Washington that time. They had spiders the size of my cats at home. There was no air conditioning, there was no carpet, and there were no flowers on the yard. There were no AA meetings, and there were no NA meetings. But my first day there, in the cafeteria, a girl called to me from across the room, and she said, I know you. I know you. And she offered to meet me on the yard that afternoon. I actually knew this girl on the streets. She was one of those people that you meet that's heart is so pure that you can see what a wonderful person she is in spite of the disease that has control of her life. And, and as much as we could be friends to each other, we had been friends out there. So I met her on the yard that day, and she brought an AA book with her. And every day we met on that yard, and we had an AA meeting. She told me it only takes 2. We had meetings on that yard. And she got out before me, and she wrote to me every day. And she made plans to meet me as soon as I got out. And we did. We went to an AA picnic together. But that's a little after I got out. Back up just a little bit. When I got out, I was sentenced to mandatory substance abuse classes. And I was okay with that because I knew that I had a problem, and I certainly didn't know what to do about it. So I went home. My father built me this little apartment on top of the garage, separate from the house. I could smoke cigarettes, which was all I really wanted at that point. Just a place for myself that I could smoke my cigarettes. I promise I'll stay away from the other stuff. Just let me have my cigarettes. And I stayed up in that little room. My father let me work for him. So I had a job. I reported to the parole board. I reported to probation. I did exactly what I had to do, and I went to those meetings. And in those meetings, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about this disease. And I learned that if I didn't do something towards recovery, that disease would grab me, and it would drag me right back down. Now, I was only sentenced to do 3 months in those meetings. And I remember my 3 months was almost up, and I started to panic. And so I went to Dave after the meeting one night, and I said, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do when I leave here? I don't know why, it didn't occur to me to go to AA. Meetings in prison were one thing, but this is the free world, right? And so that's what he told me. He said, Julie, you go to AA meetings. And it was like a light bulb. Oh, okay. So I went home and I told my parents, I gotta go to AA meetings, but I don't know where to find one. And my parents said, Julie, that church you've been a member of for 25 years. Guys, I hadn't been in like 10 or 15 years. How was I supposed to know? They had meetings twice a week. And my first meeting was on a Thursday night at the Winter Circle, which is still my home group today. Boy, y'all were scary. I was so terrified. I put on my tough prison bitch persona. My black clothes, black fingernail polish, and black lipstick. And I sat in the back of the room, and I dared y'all to speak to me. And I really think I had most of y'all fooled, except Jerry Beard. Every stinking meeting, he would come up to me after the meeting and he'd say, keep coming back. You keep coming back. Have you got a sponsor yet? Keep coming back. You know, when I left that last meeting up at the parole office, my parole officer said, don't you ever come back. And it was so nice to have somebody ask me to please keep coming back, but I did. I did. I had been beaten to such a point of pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. And after doing 2 years in prison, I didn't know any better but to do what you told me to do when you told me to do it. And AA was easy. They never asked me to drop, squat, and cough. So I kept coming back. Only problem was he kept asking me, have you got a sponsor yet? Have you got a sponsor yet? And so I finally said I would get a sponsor. We had this lady in our meetings. Have y'all ever met one of those people that when they walk in, it's like the angels sing? Oh! That was Patrice. Patrice is the one that
Oh, thank you for joining me. I'm just doing my service work, and my service work is to spread the message of AA, and hopefully these steps and these stories, experience, strength, and hope, can help those that are struggling. My name is KP, Keisha Payne, and I am 5.5 years sober, and I'm also quarantined for the C. So please pray for me. You're going to see me on here a lot, spreading the message, and also sharing a lot of Reverend Kicks messages because it's helped me over the years. Shout out to Reverend Kicks. And yeah, I love you. And I hope that these messages help you. And I hope that anyone's out there struggling, that you don't relapse and you take it one day at a time. And the seventh step, I know that I said the seventh step at the beginning of this video. And so I'll just read it again. Step 7, humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings. Think about your shortcomings, whatever that may be. It could be resentment. It could be anger. It could be your shortcomings could be the compulsion to use. And this is the 7th step prayer. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here and do your bidding. Amen. And I feel like my bidding is to share the message, to let people know that you don't have to drink, you don't have to use, and take it one day at a time.
I'm going to ask because Patrice didn't scare me. Patrice wore a halo. I swear she did. I saw it. Right up until the night that I asked her to be my sponsor, and she looked at me and she said, sweetie, I have so many, I just can't take you on, but here's Susie and she'll sponsor you. Boy, if y'all know my sponsor, you know I was too terrified to scream and run. And she asked me that night, she said, are you an alcoholic? And I said, no. I don't have a problem with alcohol. Drugs are my problem. I have a problem with drugs. She said, well, I've never smoked the pot, and I don't know where the hood is. But if you want what I've got, and you're willing to do what I did, I'll hold your hand and I'll show you the way. And that's what she did. And we began working this program. Within 6 months of the time that I came into this program, my parole officer called me, that lady that told me she never wanted to see me again. She called me and she said, I'm calling to warn you. They've taken out a warrant for your arrest. That charge that was dismissed has been brought back up. Your accomplice has gotten in a lot more trouble. They're going to throw the book at him, and therefore, it's coming back on you too. That's not fair, y'all. We can't do that. They dismissed it. She said, no. They have. She said, don't come out this weekend. Stay in your room. Keep your head low. And on Monday, you go hire an attorney. told you I was getting real good at just doing what I was told to do. And that's what I did. And I went back to that same attorney because that worked out well for me last time. So I went back to that same attorney, and my parents helped me pay for it. We hired him. And, we talked and what have you, and we determined that I had to plead guilty. So I went to court. My sponsor offered to come with me. This woman didn't know me at this point, and still she offered to come with me and hold my hands. And I said, no, I have to do this myself. My parents went.
This is a great share, and it reminds me of the when I was sharing the forgiveness and recovery, or recovery and forgiveness, that many of us sometimes have to pay the price. Whether it's the price could be time, could be pleading guilty, taking accountability for what we've done. And so this is great that she's sharing this, and she had to plead guilty to what she did, being accountable.
With me and stood behind me, and I pleaded guilty to the charge. And the judge said, before I accept your plea, do you realize this is your third charge? This carries a mandatory 30-year sentence. And I said, yes, Your Honor, but I am guilty, and I'm trying real hard to practice a program of honesty. And he said, all right, then I will sentence you to 7 years on probation, and I will give you a year for time served for what you've done in the program already. And I walked out of there on probation. My God does for me what I cannot do for myself all the time. The miracles. It's a miracle that I'm standing here. And for so long, I did not recognize these miracles. For so long, I was so busy reacting and living in fear that I couldn't see. This program and my sponsor have opened my eyes. My life is different today. A few months after that, I was up in my little room. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, so I was done smoking cigarettes. I was actually sleeping like normal people do, and getting ready for, getting a good night's sleep for work the next day. But my mother called me. It's weird. I'm in the driveway, and she calls. And she said, I need you to come over here right now. And that scared me. So I jumped up and I ran down the stairs, across the driveway, through the basement, up the stairs, up the stairs, up the stairs. I opened the door, and there were 2 police officers standing there. And I didn't even think. I reacted. I turned around and I started back down the stairs. And my mother grabbed my sleeve and she said, Julie, tell them they've made a mistake. They're trying to tell me that your little brother is dead, and that's a mistake. Folks, I had been so wrapped up in my selfishness and self-pity. My brother hadn't even spoken to me in over 5 years because out of his need to protect himself, he could not bear the pain of watching me any longer. And the night that my little brother committed suicide, his blood alcohol level was 0.27. And I didn't even know that he had a problem. But I tell you what, God is good, because I wasn't in prison and I wasn't roaming the streets. And I was at home. And I was able to take care of my parents. I was able to make sure that they ate. I was able to go out and purchase clothes for my little brother to be buried in.
And that is such a great example and a great testimony of showing up and what, working the steps and being honest with yourself and getting out of your head and out of your addiction will do, to be able to be present for those you love and not just present for yourself and your addiction. She was able to be there for her parents after the unexpected tragedy of losing her brother. And I also thank God for allowing me to be sober 2 years before my grandmother passed away. I was able to be there for her instead of drinking and thinking that I could take care of her and all that. And I'm grateful that I was able to be present. I was able to let her know that I didn't have to use alcohol to get through my day, and that before she left this earth and she went home, that I was present for her, because she was present for me for 40 years of my life. And I'm grateful that in her last months here, I was able to be, well, actually not even just her last months here, I was sober 2 years before she passed away. And so I was her caregiver, and I was able to really, really care for her. And I was able to have the strength to prepare her hair before her homegoing. And I think about how I would have been if I was drinking. I probably would have drank all the way up to the day of doing that. I don't think I would have survived that. So I thank God for that um, divine intervention, and to take that compulsion away from me. And I have empathy for all those that are suffering, and some people think it's a choice. It's not a choice. You ask for God's will, and it is a choice, but it's a disease. And when you get the tools to be able to put it down, and you're able to work through anything that comes your way, whether it's losing a job or the pandemic. I know a lot of people when the pandemic started, they weren't drinkers, but they turned into heavy drinkers, and then that also developed into a disease. And if you're not a heavy drinker, they might have started using substances that made them turn into addicts. And so I pray for all those out there that are suffering, that are going through a tough life circumstance. And I hope that you just keep practicing step one. The chemical or whatever you're doing, whether it's social media or gambling or drinking or other chemical substances, that just realize that you are it's making your life unmanageable. And ask God to remove your shortcomings, and ask the higher power of your understanding to guide you through, and to not let you fall into temptation, and just to keep praying. And yeah, I just wanted to share this, and I'm going to continue to do the service work. That my assignment is to save lives, and to share my experience, strength, and hope through myself, and with others, through others, to save your life.
And I was able to stand up and be accountable. I was able to walk with dignity and respect. Those are things that I threw away in order to feed this disease. Those are things that this program and working with a sponsor gave back to me. And I have found that we go through fires in this program too. But we do the next right thing. When we don't know what that is, I call my sponsor. By God, she doesn't have a problem in the world telling me what to do. And she didn't have a problem in the world holding my hand and walking me through it. My sponsor has provided me with things that I've never been able to get before. I spent my entire
Shout out to one of my sponsors I had. I can't say her name, obviously, but my first sponsor, she has over 42 years of sobriety, and her and I have the same sobriety date, January 1st. Obviously, hers is 40 years ago, but mine is January 1st of 2018. That was actually the first day that I was sober. My last drink was December 31st of 2017, when I was 37 years old. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud to say, yeah, the last time I had a drink, I was 37 years old. And the reason why I stopped is because I realized that it wasn't working for me anymore. It didn't, oh gosh, it's so loud outside, but that's okay. Um, it wasn't working for me anymore. It wasn't fun anymore. I was starting to black out. I was starting to people were telling me about myself. I was cussing people out, forgetting. There are times when what did I do? I remember one time, I didn't even realize that it was a holiday, and I took my kid to school, dropped him off, and didn't even realize that there wasn't even there wasn't even any cars in the parking lot. And then I just realized, and then I saw him walking home. He was like, "Mom, there was no school today." That was years ago. But yeah, I mean, I don't have any shame of sharing that because I'm not there anymore. That's how I used to be. And I've grown from that, and I'm a miracle. I almost died in 2017. And God let me live. So I'm grateful that I'm not one of the ones who had to die so others could live. I'm one of the ones that God allowed me to live so I can share the miracle that's happened to me. So I pray that if you're out there suffering, that you could, if you want to become the miracle, just one day at a time, put it down. You can start over another day. If you feel like you've messed up, you don't have to drink, you don't have to use. Pray for God to relieve the compulsion from you.
Our life going to the hardware store looking for a loaf of bread, making demands of people that they could not fulfill, and trying to twist and manipulate people into being who I wanted them to be, where I wanted them to be. My sponsor has taught me to love people for who they are and where they are, not for what I need and want out of it. And when I need somebody to hold me and rock me like a baby, she doesn't have a problem putting me in her lap. And all this time I thought I was so mean. I really was just a little child that needed to be held and rocked. This program's been really good to me. I have a full-time job now. That was another miracle. One of the suppliers that my daddy bought from, every time I went in, they would ask me, "Do you want a real job yet?" And I'd say, "No, you don't understand. I'm helping my daddy. He needs me. He's getting old. He's had a few mishaps. He needs me." And finally, somebody in this program, somebody brutally honest, laughed at me and said, "Has it ever occurred to you he could retire if he wasn't supporting you?" I hadn't thought about that. So I put several conditions on that job, and believe it or not, God met every one of them and then some. And I don't know exactly how long it was. I'd like to think it was several months, but yeah, my daddy retired. So I have a real job now. I've been there for 7 years. Holy shit. That is amazing. That is really amazing. And I had a relationship in this program for 5 years. I learned a lot in that relationship. I grew a lot. And I learned how to be a woman of dignity and respect. But I also learned in that relationship.
And before Julie continues to tell us what she's learned in that relationship, I would like to tell you guys, if you're a woman or a man or whatever you identify as, actually, I'm just going to say, I'm going to keep it at woman and man. I don't care. So it's not suggested that men and women help each other. Help each other in recovery. And what that means is women should sponsor women and men should sponsor men. So that there's no type of confusion. There's no type of, you can definitely have like accountability partners, but when it comes to recovery, you really should be led through the same gender. Go to meetings, that's fine. Go to co-ed meetings, but it gets the lines get blurred in recovery when you have a sponsor. When you're a woman, you have a sponsor that's a man, and just it's self-explanatory. You know what could happen. So some people they do it, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be successful. So that's just a word of advice for me.
There are still some things that I want that are not what God had intended for me. My time in that relationship was done. Yeah, I left claw marks for a long time. But I finally decided um, that if that wasn't where I was supposed to be, that it was time to move on, and I did. It was painful. It was very painful. But, as soon as I opened my hands and I was willing to let go, God started filling my hands with blessings all over again. I had a part-time job in the fall, and I worked weekends. So I worked my full-time job all week, and on the weekends I work also. I had, out of 3 months, I was scheduled to work 12 weekends. I had 1 weekend off. And while and actually I didn't have it off. My sponsor had me busy one day that weekend. But anyways, so that Friday night when I got off work, I took my son out to eat. We're standing in line at the restaurant. I'm getting ready to pay, and my phone starts ringing. My youngest son. And I don't generally do this, but I told him, just answer the phone, honey. Just answer the phone. Mama's trying to handle this. So he answered the phone, and he got so excited. And he said, yes, oh, yes, yeah, okay, click. I'm like, what the heck? He said, Mama, we're going to Netherworld tonight. Who does that? Who asked a kid to come to Netherworld? That's in Norcross, y'all. But he was so excited. I had missed out on so much in this kid's life. I couldn't turn him down, even though it was my 1 weekend off. So we met up with a bunch of friends at a meeting house, and we caravanned out to Netherworld to Norcross. And when we got there, things just kind of worked out. People paired off. People went where they were going to go. One child was too afraid to go into, and my sweet little son volunteered to stand outside with him, which left me standing there looking crazy by myself. It just so happened that there was a gentleman there in the group that I had never met before that was going to have to go through by himself too. So I said, all right, here we go. Let's go. So we went through this haunted house, and have y'all ever been in Netherworld? That's a pretty intense haunted house. I went through most of it like this. Just like this. With my face down, I was afraid to look up, and through the whole place, he kept saying, look up, it's so beautiful. Look up, it's so beautiful. And every time I'd look up, I would see monsters. But I did also see like some rocks and, ooze coming out of the rocks and stuff. I just didn't get it, so I kept putting my head back down. And he was a really nice guy. When we finished that evening, everybody else was going on to eat or what have you. And I said, I can't. I've got to meet my sponsor at 7 a.m. And so my son and I, we went home. And we got up the next morning, and we went to meet my sponsor at 7 a.m. And by 9 o'clock, that nice gentleman showed up and said, I just wanted to make sure that you made it to work okay and that you guys weren't too tired. He said, and, if you ever want to, you can call me. And he handed me his business card, and he left. Now, y'all remember, I had not been long out of a relationship that ended very painfully for me. And so I didn't call immediately. I waited 2 weeks, and I waited. But get this, okay? I waited till I was on my way out of town to another state because that was safe, right? And so we talked the entire time, and it was a several-hour drive. We talked the whole time. And at one point, he lets me know that he's a stonemason. And I said, now I get it. The haunted house, all the rocks. It was the rocks, the rock work you were looking at. And he said, no, silly. It was your face. I just wanted you to look at it so I could see your face. Guys, y'all write that down because that was it. I was done. So we began dating, and by February, this was in October, and on Valentine's Day he proposed to me. And I found out he had already talked to my youngest son about it, and he had already called my father in Virginia to ask for his blessing also. So I called my sponsor. Boy, she was a little hesitant too. And I said, I love him, but I don't want to screw up what I've got, and this program has to be number one in my life, or I don't have a life. I can't be a wife and I can't be a mother. And we discussed it. And I said, okay, over a year. I will wait over a year to get married. And she said, all right, let's see you do that. And so he and I discussed it, and we agreed. We agreed to wait 14 months. We picked a date out of the air. And 14 months later, my family came down from Virginia. My daddy walked me down the aisle. And my mother turned to my sponsor and said, I gave birth to her, but you raised her. And I got married that day. I've got to tell y'all, that was the most beautiful wedding ever. I hope y'all missed that. I am so blessed to have met a man that practiced this program. He makes it number one in his life. And he looks at me in a way that nobody's ever looked at me before. That evening, on our way down to Florida for our honeymoon, we were driving through Florida, and we went through this one spot. It's late at night. I guess it's Saturday night. 1 o'clock in the morning, and the popo is out in full force. And we're watching, and I'm looking at this huge full moon shining down on the water, and I'm seeing the police lined up on either side of the road, and they've got cars pulled over. And it just suddenly occurs to me, our book talks about a restoration to sanity. And it just suddenly occurred to me, this is sanity. Because they're not going to pull me over. I'm not worried about it at 1 o'clock on a Saturday morning.
I could definitely relate to that. I remember the first time I got pulled over in sobriety. I was I think I was 3 months sober when I got pulled over. And it felt great because I wasn't nervous. I didn't have any residual, um, you know, like symptoms of being, of drinking. Because when you drink, when you're an alcoholic or you over drink, you drink too much, and say you start on a Friday, you still feel that on a Monday or a Tuesday, and you might not be, at your best. And so when I got pulled over when I was 3 months sober, it felt so good I didn't get a ticket. Speaking of which, I do have a ticket that I need to take care of, but I felt good that I did not have to look over my back or anything like that. And I was definitely completely sober. And I just hope that nobody goes out there, don't drink and drive. Yeah, it felt great.
Not drunk. I'm not riding dirty. I'm practicing a program of recovery. And I'm working principles in my life every day. Both of my children are a big part of my life now. I forgot to tell y'all, they went to AA meetings with me. Some of y'all know my kids. One of the most painful things I had to do in this program was learning to enforce consequences of people crossing my boundaries. I didn't have any boundaries for a long time. I was one of those people, when I came in, my sponsor said, I don't care what they ask you. You say not until I talk to my sponsor. You've been saying yes to everything for way too long.
If you're painstaking about this phase of your development, you'll be amazed before you're halfway through. You're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. You will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. You will comprehend the word serenity, and you will know peace. No matter how far down the scale you've gone, you will see how your experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self pity will disappear. You will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in your fellows. Self seeking will slip away. Your whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave you. You will intuitively handle situations which used to baffle you. You will suddenly realize that God is doing for you which you cannot do for yourself. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They're being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They'll always materialize if we work for them. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference.